now. That's great. So I think it's time for us to get started, because thank you for everybody who joined on time, promptly. And I'm sure I've already had people telling me they'll be joining a little bit later on. So that's great. We'll get going. As I mentioned, if you get a moment, please put your name and city into the chat. And that'd be great. A couple of somebody just told me chat is off. Well, that's the first technical glitch. Okay, apologies for that. Ignore that comment. The rest of it's going to go seamlessly. So we're going to move on anyway. We'll get a chance to do that. There is Q&A, and that actually leads me to this point here, which is a little bit of housekeeping before we get going. This session is being recorded, as you will have been informed as you joined. It's going to be just the panelists who are being recorded, so none of your video or audio will be included in that. If you're asking questions, please use the Q&A feature, as one of you have already found and informed us, because the chat is off. So that'd be great. Now, I'm going to try and keep us all to schedule, get us all moving forward on this conversation. This is going to be roughly what the agenda is. We're going to do a few minutes of welcome and introduction. We're going to have this panel discussion, which is going to last around 35 minutes, that will cover these themes. And at the end of that discussion, we're going to open it up for your questions as well. So again, please put the questions in the Q&A. That'd be fantastic. We shall move on. So I'm going to ask each of my panelists to introduce themselves briefly. Each has got up to 60 seconds, and I've already preordained the order. So Lucy, I'm going to hand over to you first of all. Please introduce yourself.
Thank you. I'm Lucy Williams. I'm the digital design lead at Abstract. And I've been championing sustainable web design for about 2 to 3 years now, and really working with our team and having conversations with our clients about how we can weave sustainable design principles into our user experience thinking, into our creative design, and into our development. And at Abstract, we are a digital agency based in Nottingham, and we predominantly make websites for our clients. And I think where we differ is that we really work with our clients to strike that balance between a really strong creative digital brand online, but a very performant website that has great SEO and is purpose driven, and then weaving through that all of that sustainable thinking to ensure that that website is as low carbon as possible.
Excellent. Thank you. And well within the 60 seconds, well rehearsed. So Matt, over to you, please.
Cool. Good to see you, everyone. And yeah, I'm Matt, CTO and founder at High Yield. So High Yield is a digital product studio. We're kind of a climate conscious digital product studio in terms of how we bring our products and websites to life with sustainability in mind at all times. So we deliver various different projects. It may be kind of a new MVP for a startup or a website. And I think in how we approach that from a user-centered point of view, but also having sustainability in mind has been a big driving point for us. So that wasn't always the way. So we're about 5 years old as an agency. We've certainly evolved over that time. And in the past 18 months, we really started kind of focusing on sustainability. And it was kind of an application for B Corporation that made us move more in that sustainable direction. And we feel like adding kind of the climate conscious focus to our work is really just heading more and more in that direction, and working with kind of purpose-led organizations to help bring their digital products to life.
Well, wonderful. Thank you for that. Claire, if you could do the honors and introduce yourself, please.
Yes. Hi, I'm Claire. I am Digital Strategy and Sustainability Manager at NeoVerve. I primarily have a product management background, but I ended up in the field of digital sustainability by building a web performance tool, actually, which is what brought us into websites. And that has kind of continued on a broader spectrum. And I am now in charge of putting together a service offering for green IT as a whole. So really looking at the entire spectrum. Websites, of course, are a small part of that and are definitely a part of it. But yeah, so it's looking at the bigger spectrum of it, which is actually very exciting, and how to bring that into also digital products and digital transformation, because there's a lot of talk of this twin transition of digitalization as well as decarbonization. So a lot of things going on around that topic as well.
Brilliant. Thank you, Claire. Thank you, Lucy and Matt, as well, for introducing yourself. I think so. Now, what we're here today to talk about is digital and sustainability. Those two words together, what does it mean? So I think let's kick this off by just having a look at what technology is doing, both good and bad. I have this belief that technology has really enabled our civilizations to thrive. And if we look back all the way to things like technology in its broadest sense, like taming a fire, the agricultural and industrial revolutions, technology has been there. It's been the thing that's kind of really accelerated our civilizations and made today possible. It's only now, though, that we're really understanding the true extent of the side effects of those technologies that have got us to this point. And I think what we're trying to do here, what I'm trying to do, is really to kind of apply the wisdom of our kind of hindsight and make sure that as we move forward, we're trying to use technology more for good, whilst mindfully reducing the side effects or the bad that the technology can achieve. So I think in terms of digital sustainability, it addresses both of these things, really. It's actually there's two sides of the coin here, depending on who you speak to. And what I want us to do in this webinar is to look at both of those, really. So on one side, you've got the technology that how technologies are helping us achieve our sustainability goals, and that for me is as broad as you can think about in terms of sustainability. And kind of I look at it in terms of these fuzzy things back here that hopefully you'll recognize as the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. So I think I'm looking at technologies that help us kind of relieve poverty, end hunger, help us with life above water, life above land, life below water, all of these different things. But there's also the other side where we can look at technology, we can look at the impact it has on people, nature, planet, and we can start to apply our sustainability practices and sustainability thinking to those technologies as well. So on this theme, looking at the first side of that coin, I'm going to ask our panelists to talk about how technology is doing good. Give us some examples, and I'll kick things off really with thinking about it from the people side of things. So over the last few years and beyond, I've had the opportunity to work with lots of different startups all over the planet, doing all sorts of different things. And it's really impressive to see how many different ways different technologies are having different kind of impacts on people, from powering from solar powered charging stations in small rural communities in Africa that allow businesses to thrive on simple mobile phones, through to kind of humanistic AI, where you're using humans plus AI to achieve something that is greater than the sum of each of them on their own. And there's some really great examples of how that's being used in cancer detection. You've also got a startup I met just this week that's developed a really novel hardware and software combination for helping children with ADHD and anxiety disorders. That's a really impactful thing. And then a more obscure company I saw a couple of weeks ago that is using spider silk to actually repair nerve damage in humans as well. So there's all of these big ideas, small ideas all over the world where technology is helping us achieve some kind of sustainability goal. Then we've got the mobile phones, video calls, remote monitoring that are helping us to connect, to empower, to alleviate loneliness, save lives. And I could, and I do speak for hours on these topics, so I won't. What I want to do now is I want to hand over to Claire and ask Claire, from the kind of planet and environmental point of view, what kind of technologies are you interested in? What technologies are exciting you in terms of how we're achieving some of these sustainability goals?
I think there's a lot of talk about the energy transition, which I think is very exciting in terms of how do we harness the energy from wind and solar, and how do we combine these things? I mean, at the moment I'm renovating my house, so there's a lot of discussion on how can we make it the most energy efficient possible, and for example installed a heat pump, and I think the interesting thing is how do we bring this into our own homes. So I guess that's what's exciting me at the moment, is that solar panels are becoming quite cheap for us to install in our own homes, and it's making it accessible to many. So I think that's what excites me at the moment, that it's becoming more and more accessible. I kind of feel very often sustainability is a topic that can be quite exclusive to people who have a big wallet. And as we continue and the research is being done, things like solar panels are becoming cheaper, which means it enables us as individuals to bring it into our homes. So I guess the thing that excites me is that it's becoming more accessible. And it needs to be, because sustainability needs to be accessible to everyone, for everyone to be able to make that change.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great point, and it kind of leads into something I hope we pick up on later on, which is how we can start to do these things in our own personal lives, but then how we can bring these into our work, into the people we interact with. You know, I've got a solar panel out there that runs this office, and every call I have, I talk about it. So hopefully it kind of propagates a message and gets people curious as to how they can do that as well. So I like that. Matt, can we maybe narrow this down into some digital technologies as well, as we're talking about digital sustainability? Where do we go with digital for things doing good?
Yes, it's a really good question, and I think as you said, more broadly, technology has kind of supported change over throughout the ages, and I think it's no different now in terms of how technology can impact sustainability, and especially digital technology. So, looking at, I think, some of the more interesting projects around IoT devices, that's Internet of Things, where we're kind of monitoring and censoring different environmental conditions, so maybe helping with kind of deforestation and elements like that. Those devices can report all of that data back, and now we're in kind of the age of AI, and it's completely unavoidable that we will start analyzing data en masse. So I think looking at more how we can not just collect that data, but how we can analyze it in a digital setting and really get a lot of use out of that data. I think another thing that's quite interesting is artificial intelligence. And obviously that's a big consumer of energy at the moment. So it can do a lot of good, but it's also creating a lot of bad in terms of the energy consumption to power kind of these large language models in the cloud. So what we're seeing is, and probably we'll see more of, is a shift towards AI on the edge, which is essentially your mobile devices or physical devices, kind of closer to where we all kind of live and inhabit. They will be able to run these large language models rather than being able to run in the cloud. So they will still run in the cloud, but we will be able to kind of use these models locally, so we don't need to send large volumes of traffic over the internet for analysis. So I think we'll probably see a lot more of that very soon.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. You picked up on some great things there about being mindful and being aware of what we're collecting, where we're storing it, how much we need, and then what we do for it. I think when it comes to what we're doing with digital, it's about that mindfulness of the use. So, I mean, when it comes to use, Lucy, I know you would give us an idea maybe of how you're using some of these technologies that are doing good in your business or in your personal world today.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess you can start small, and I think there are some technologies you can be using quite quickly, and you probably already are, without thinking about the impact, perhaps like having these Zoom calls using Google Meet or Teams. Like even those digital technologies mean you're avoiding travel using cars, trains, etc. So they're really positive starters. I personally really love to use the Ecosia browser, which is literally the search engine that plants trees. So they're fantastic. Like 100% of their profits go towards reforestation projects and renewable energy projects. So I guess just by simply switching your search engine to Ecosia, every search you're putting in there is going to have a positive impact. We like to use ecology at Abstract, we very much use that as a way to sort of accelerate our impact right now and make sure we can offset our entire team's personal emissions. So all those holidays we're having and flying around, actually ecology will help our individuals. We can offset their personal emissions and have that climate action workforce. I know Ecology Zero's just come out beta as well. That's a new technology that integrates with your accounting software. So it can really help you to calculate and report specifically on your carbon footprint. And then I'd like to talk, lastly about B1G1, which is a fantastic digital technology that helps you become a business for good. So essentially the model is that you can set up automation. So if something good happens in your business, like you have a new client call or you get a lead in through a web form, you can automate it to then invest into projects that are doing good for people and the planet. We actually use it in a slightly different way at Abstract. We have a monthly giving budget. So every month a different team member gets to log into our B1G1 account and we get to choose where that budget gets spent. So it's a lovely way for the whole team to feel like they're contributing and able to invest and fund projects and initiatives that mean something to them. And all those projects are all tied in and aligned with the UN Sustainable Development Goals. So I think last month I helped to fund beach cleanups in Indonesia, for example. So it's a fantastic technology, yeah.
No, brilliant. I'm a big fan of B1G1. I've been using it as well. There's other, like, if you're interested in carbon offsetting, carbon removals, there's another platform you should check out called Patch. I use that as well for helping kind of sponsor near-term removal projects such as kelp farming or carbon sequestration through soil amendment and things like that. So there's some really cool technologies helping us kind of move forward, particularly with the climate, but also, as you mentioned, through B1G1, many other things going on at a social and community level as well. So I mean, it's really, I think I'm an optimist for technology. I do think there's a huge role for technology to play in making our world a safer, fairer, healthier place for all. And what I'm mindful of, though, is that we could be stumbling into a future regret about, you know, if only we'd understood the impact of the things we were doing earlier, we might have been kind of we might have made different choices. And I think it's those impacts, because digital is digital and it's kind of an ethereal thing, that it's difficult for us to really grasp. For example, you know, if you think about, you know, I've got a box of old tech here. It's 1 out of 5 that I used to have. The others have gone. These ones I use every now and then. But that e-waste that we store and we hoard, that stuff that we just get rid of without really being mindful of where it goes, that ends up in far-flung places on our planet. I think I heard the statistic when I was doing a report a while ago that 80% of recycled IT isn't actually properly recycled. And that goes to places where they don't have strict health and safety rules, and it causes cancer and deformity in young adults and children. It's horrible what happens. So that is one of the sustainability kind of downsides that we don't see, but it's happening every single day. There's the water side of things as well. Google in 2018 consumed 15.8 billion liters of water. It's 4,000 Olympic swimming pools to run their data or to cool their data centers. That's before AI really took off. There's the land mass. I was talking to somebody who runs a big technology company yesterday, and he says just one of his data centers is about the size of 8 747s nose to tail. I mean, that's just one of them. It's enormous. And then, of course, we got greenhouse gas emissions as well, which, you know, this is now being, the internet is often cited as being the contributing more greenhouse gas emissions than the entire aviation industry, which I think is a shocking statistic. The other way of looking at it is if you kind of treat it like a nation, it would be the 4th largest polluter behind Russia, China, and India. Behind USA, China, and India, and just ahead of Russia, which is, again, phenomenal, this ethereal thing that we have here. So I guess, you know, moving on from that, Claire, what do you think about these emissions? Where are they coming from? And when we go to renewables, doesn't this all go away?
I love that question. It's my favorite one. I'll answer the second one first. If we move everything to renewables, doesn't it all go away? Absolutely not, because you have to remember all of the technology that collects or consumes, I'm not quite sure what the right word is for that, the renewable energy is technology that is also using raw materials from the ground. So it's not for free. And I always like to say, you know, technology uses hardware. We can't use our software without the hardware, and the hardware is created by all the rare metals that are often not ethically sourced. There's a lot of discussion around cobalt and how it's unethically sourced, but also the production produces a lot of emissions and needs a lot of water as well. And like you already mentioned, Scott, the water that is needed to cool the data centers is also a huge amount, and it's clean water. So that's also something that's really important. I think in terms of technology, we could be spending more time in looking into how can we cool our data centers in an alternative way that isn't using clean water that is in some places actually being taken away from citizens. And so at the end of the day, clean energy or renewable energy isn't actually for free. The resources that we need to build solar panels or wind farms take resources from the earth, and the earth's resources are finite, and therefore technology is also finite. And I think that's something that very often is forgotten in the discussion around digitalization, and how digitalization can be almost a silver bullet to decarbonization. But people aren't thinking about, okay, a solar panel is also hardware, needs to be created. It has most of its emissions and technology is in production. I think it's about 80%. And this conversation is often left out of the conversation. And I think that's important. That's why I'm also on a mission to raise that awareness. But yeah, at the end of the day, there are many aspects. There are social aspects, there's water, and it's not just carbon emissions, and it's not just data centers, but also, you know, we know that the internet is not in the cloud and it's not virtual, it's actually physical across the world, and in circuits and switches and cables under the oceans and seas and everything. It's all hardware. So I think that's mostly where the emissions come from, not just running the software and the hardware, but the hardware is a huge part of it.
Yeah, I think that energy piece and the hardware for that, they call it it's the embodied carbon and
Yes.
the operational or process carbon. It's 80-20. So the other interesting thing I like to think about there is, will we ever be in a world where there is infinite amount of renewable energy? I think the answer is no, really. And even if we are, then there's going to be a commercial market that drives it one way or another, which will lead to kind of unfairness in the situation as well. So instead of just thinking and hoping we're going to have an infinite amount of renewable energy, we should be thinking and acting now to make sure that we actually use it wisely for what we need it for and not squander it. So I think from a digital carbon footprint point of view, all of that kind of factors in to it in a way. But I think, you know, in my conversations, there's some companies that think that, oh, digital carbon footprint isn't really a concern of theirs, and there's others that kind of get it. Matt, what do you think? What do you see in your conversations? Are digital carbon footprints everybody's problem? Should everybody be aware of them, taking action, or is it just for some or others? Or what do you think?
I think it's one of those things that we have to look into our own life as, you know, consumers, and I think there's a kind of a groundswell of people actually taking positive steps to kind of lower their impact generally, and actually as corporate entities, there should be no different there. So, you know, businesses should be taking account for their digital carbon footprint, and I think it's something that it feels like it can be a task that, you know, other people are taking care of. You know, the cloud providers, they'll take care of it. I don't need to worry about it. But actually, it's one of those things where everyone doing their bit, every organization doing their bit adds up to something that's bigger than one entity can do, like a cloud provider. So I think in cases where we're kind of looking at companies taking a bit more accountability for their carbon footprint, there are some kind of basic things that they can look at, such as green hosting, finding a provider that does power their data centers with renewable or predominantly renewable energy. They can look at kind of their websites and optimizing those. So there's some smaller things there. There's lots of great stuff that Lucy's already mentioned about kind of working with your team to offset some of their carbon, with commutes and things like that. Obviously, offsetting is not the answer to the problem we have here, but again, in my opinion, it's kind of any of these small positive steps that we can take as individuals or businesses to kind of just result in us heading slowly in the right direction.
No, I think that's some good points. And I think you picked up on small. Now, there's some really, the power of small. There's some really great quotes on the power of small. The one I like is, and it may be a misquote, but it's all over the internet, so I'll go with it. It's Van Gogh. And it says, great things come from a series of small things coming together. And I think if we all think about how we can change things in a small incremental way, but do it as a group, as a collective, we have a much greater impact than we could have on our own. I was in a B Corp event a few weeks ago, and a lady summed it up there really nicely. She said, first of all, small things are just big things that haven't grown up. And then also small things are the things that give us the confidence to try and do something bigger. So yeah, thank you for bringing that up. Lucy, I know you're B Corp as well. So in that idea of trying to be a better business and do things better all the time, where do digital carbon footprints fit in your thinking, your actions, as well as those of the clients and prospects you speak to?
I think, as a B Corp in the digital world, I think there's definitely a responsibility on us, our web agencies, for example, to really educate our clients, because there is still a massive lack of awareness around a digital carbon footprint, or that what my website can have cause carbon emissions. Like there's still that massive lack of awareness around it. So I think it's our responsibility to educate a bit more. I was quite surprised. I read an article a few days ago on LinkedIn, and this company had gone and they'd chosen like 100 different B Corps, and they'd looked at their homepages and they'd run every homepage through the website carbon calculator tool, and they graded them to see if, like, from A+ down to a dirty F, if you like, that rating that we see. And of the 100 B Corp websites, over 2/3 were scoring an E or an F. So I found it quite surprising that even in, amongst B Corp businesses, there's still perhaps that lack of awareness that their website can have an impact on carbon emissions, for example. So, and then you asked, sorry, about how those carbon footprints really fit into our clients' thinking. So it's quite a mixed bag. I like to think back to like having these conversations for years with clients. So if I cast my mind back sort of 2 or 3 years ago, and I remember one of the first clients I really spoke to about their website's impact, and I got a sort of belly roll laugh, like that really like sniggering sort of absolute disbelief, laughing at me like, is she for real? Like, so yeah, it was, so thankfully we have moved on in those few years, we have moved on from those belly roll laughs that I used to get hit with, and now we get quite a mixed bag. I think you've got this very large organizations who perhaps have got bigger like ESG strategies to deal with. So when we talk to them specifically about their digital carbon footprint and their website, they're a bit more concerned with like the big, shipping routes and their recyclable packaging, for example. They're more involved in the physical part of the sustainability, not the digital side. So yeah, you do get some companies that it's not their biggest priority, unfortunately. And it's a bit more of that sort of afterthought, nice to have when they're thinking about their digital footprint. But more recently, actually, we're getting more clients coming through to us, and they come with a brief, which is good for starters anyway, hey Matt? You can agree there. They come with a brief, and they're actually like starting to write that into their brief. Their KPI is, we want a website, but we want it to score an A or an A+. So it's actually featuring in their briefs as a KPI. And actually, I think the conversation is starting to evolve now, because the conversation now goes, right, okay, your KPIs have a low carbon website that scores an A, but your other KPIs, like often with marketing teams, is they want to increase traffic to their website. So they need to then put in Google Analytics tracking scripts to actually find out how many visitors they're getting, to see if they're hitting that KPI, or they want to increase leads through their web forms, so they want to integrate with HubSpot. So we're starting to have those changing conversations where we're educating an already slightly educated client now on different topics in terms of how can we balance those competing KPIs and what is the priority for this project. Because yeah, it's just interesting how the conversations are starting to evolve now with clients and their thinking.
Yeah, I see. I definitely see that too, and I think yeah, there's a stick and a carrot in this conversation. So the carrot, I guess, is that we see the issues around us, and we want to move forward and do something positive. And I think many of the companies you're speaking with are probably in that bucket. You then get the regulatory stick that's being thrashed around in all sorts of directions right now, and what do they call it? The regulatory waterfall. So you start with the big companies, and it comes down and comes down and comes down. I was talking to a very large British public sector organization that I shan't mention the name of. In 2 years' time, they will have a mandate that every single supplier to them needs to include their emissions data, including digital as well. Now, the thing is, that's going to come as a shock to many people in 2 years' time. And at that point, we're going to be, that stick is going to feel really, really strong, really, really heavy. So I think right now, what we're all trying to do here is to try and make sure that people are aware of these things that are coming, aware that it's not too difficult to start now and then build on it as we go. But if you leave it too late, it becomes a bit of a shock and a bit kind of overwhelming. And I think that leads us nicely kind of into our third theme here, which is, we've talked about some of the good, we've talked about some of the bad. What would be really handy is to kind of move into now to flesh out more of those things that we can do as individuals on the call, but also what can we do when we go home or when we go into the office. And I think if I just reflect on how these conversations go with me, and I'm sure I'd love to get your nods or your head shakes if it's wrong. I know when I'm having these conversations, there's normally a moment where people go, "Oh, digital has a footprint. I didn't realize that." And then it's oh, it's quite complicated. Oh, but I don't know where to start. And it's too complicated. I've got other things to do. And that's kind of how the conversation goes. So yeah, I've been working on what are these small things that we can do, and they lead to bigger things. I met an organization yesterday, Innovation Zero, that is installing data center infrastructure under, I don't know if it's under or near, swimming pools, so that they can actually heat the swimming pools and save the carbon from heating the swimming pool with the data center infrastructure. I love ideas like that, where somebody else's kind of waste is a product for something else, and all of that kind of comes together and reduces footprints and makes things better. But let's kind of scroll back from superheating swimming pools with Amazon Web Services. It wasn't them, and come back to some kind of some more kind of practical things that everyone can do. So Lucy, maybe we start with you. Kind of give us some ideas of what we could do.
Well, I'm obviously going to say start with your website, because that's my background. But I mean, it's true, is every company's got a website, so that is a good place to start if you're just beginning that digital sustainability journey and learning. So yeah, I'd say have a quick look at your website for starters. There is a great website called websitecarbon.com. You can punch in your URL and it will go away and it will calculate what the carbon emissions of that web page are based on every time it gets reloaded. So that's a great place to start, just to get an initial idea and measurement and assessment of where your website carbon is looking. And then I have to mention Digital Carbon Online, right? I mean, that's that's a fantastic tool as well. If you want to then take the next step and not just look at a single web page, if you want to be looking at the entirety of your website, Digital Carbon Online allows you to see every page on your site based on real traffic that's coming to those pages. So then you can really focus, right, which pages are having the most impact, because based on how much carbon they're emitting, but also how much traffic they're getting to them. So it really helps you to kind of over a period of time just keep chipping away at your site and making revisions and making improvements. Alternatively, yeah, you can also come to a web agency as well. We also often do sustainability audits or do a little health check on your website. So I think that's another great place to start if you want a bit more hand holding. Someone can take you through, you know, where your website it can be improved, the things you can be doing to constantly continue on that journey, I suppose.
Brilliant. And Matt, well, first of all, Lucy, thank you for the plug. I mean, where do I sign up?
Right?
Yeah, exactly. Where do I sign up? Matt, don't feel that you have to plug Digital Carbon Online as well, but maybe you've got some ideas of where people could start and what they could do. Maybe looking at kind of, if they were trying to go into their website, what should they be looking for themselves?
Yeah, I completely agree with Lucy. I think the first step is to start tracking. So using those services, including Digital Carbon Online, very good place to start. I think looking at some of the pages, as Lucy said, and concentrating on the pages that may get a high volume of traffic. Look at those maybe first. One of the biggest things that we always see as soon as we're doing an audit is generally image size is one of the biggest things. So one of the biggest impacts on your carbon emissions, your digital carbon emissions, will be the size of the page as it comes over the wire. So as it gets delivered to each of your users on their computers, the size of that website. And one of the biggest things that we see is always uncompressed images. So large images when they don't need to be as large as they should be, or if they're poorly compressed. That's probably the most simple thing that you can address straight off. So you can get some plugins. If you're using WordPress, you can get some plugins to do that. Some of those plugins have online platforms. So Smush is one where you don't need to be on WordPress. You could be on any platform and it'll run your images through that platform. It will compress them. It'll change them to ideally WebP, which is kind of an image format that's very much conducive to kind of optimized web images. And that would be probably a great place to start, because that's when we do audits, that's normally the first thing that gets raised. After that, it gets slightly more technical. It may be JavaScript payloads are quite big and you need to trim those. You have to maybe reorder how JavaScript is loading to make it more efficient. I think one of the other things that is also a quick win would be to introduce a CDN, which is a content delivery network. So if you put your website through a content delivery network, essentially your traffic doesn't immediately hit your server, because your server may be in the UK, but your visitors may be in France or the US. What a CDN does is it basically caches a version of your website on the edge of its network. So what happens if someone visits your site in the US, they'll get the cached version from a server in the US, rather than that traffic having to go all over to the UK and then all the way back from the UK server. So some really good examples of that. Cloudflare is probably the industry leader, and Cloudflare actually, it comes with a bunch of other things that you can switch on that's really great, such as image optimization. So that's another service that Cloudflare use as part of that. So that would be my quick wins from a more technical point of view, I guess.
Yeah, brilliant. And I think CDNs are really interesting because they can be part of the problem, but they can also be part of the solution. It's important to understand when you choose your CDN provider that you look for those that are on renewable energy as well. The other benefit is, like you say, because they cache the page, it reduces processing on your server. But you need to make sure you understand what the processing is on their server to deliver that. It should be much lighter, but they can be a good part of the solution. So I think we've dived right down into the rabbit hole of website carbon footprints, which is brilliant, because some great tools mentioned there by both Lucy and Matt. Thank you. Now let's kind of pull ourselves back out again and think more broadly about digital sustainability as well. Claire, can you give us some maybe other things that we can go about in our lives?
Yeah, I think for me, the most important thing is to really look at the big picture, take a step back. I recently was at an event where a team was talking about how they used artificial intelligence to identify inefficient code and then replaced it with artificial intelligence generated code, which then in turn meant that they were saving X amount of energy. All great. But they never talked about how much energy they were using by using the artificial intelligence. And this is something that I have seen all too often in the topic of digital sustainability, is firstly the topic of that's so focused on energy efficiency, but not looking at the big picture. It's not just about energy efficiency, it's all about the resources as well, like I was talking about before. And so I think it's really important to take a step back and look at the big picture. Something that I think is a good way of doing it is, I call it an anti-persona. Is, very many times UX designers or just product designers come up with personas that they're building a product specifically for a specific user, and then they test it on that specific user. And then if they achieve what they want to achieve with that specific user, they've succeeded. But very often what's left out of the conversation, usually probably down to the fact that the budget isn't there, is the conversation about, okay, how can this product be abused? How can it have, an impact, an environmental impact in one side? I always talk about, there's a vegan restaurant in Madrid that's really great, and you walk in and they say, thank you for saving the planet because you're eating vegan, and then all the food comes in paper plates. And you're like, well, what? And very often I see these siloed views of, this is the one topic that I'm talking about, so this is where I'm going to do my work. And then the other topics are forgotten. Now, it's not to criticize anything in no way, shape, or form, because I do not believe in ever criticizing someone who is doing something. But it's my pain point, or like my personal pain point, that very often I see people doing something and they want to do something and they are doing something great, but they haven't looked at the bigger picture. And therefore, by reducing their emissions in one side of things, they're increasing the emissions on another side. And that's very much what I see in business, right? Like very often, again, this topic of the twin transition, going digital means we can decarbonize. Yeah, maybe in your industry, but at the same time, going digital in absolutely everything without actually thinking about it consequentially is also raising the emissions of the IT industry. So I think a very good way is to take a step back, look at the big picture. There is an impact canvas that you can use, for example, that you break it down, you look at the positive impact and the negative impact, right down to the social side of things, the material side of things, the societal side of things. So I think that's a really good tool to use when you're designing products. The anti-persona is one of my favorite, and also defining the unintended consequences, which is sometimes hard, but products are always used in ways that you might not have thought about, but very often it's just because you haven't thought about it.
I love that. One of the games we play with the kids when we're trying to keep them entertained is we'll pick something up from the table and try and find 100 uses for that thing. So yeah, I like that, trying to think about how it could be used in a way that was unintended. I also like about the point you make about needing to think about things and having those data points to think about it. And that's exactly what, I'm not going to plug myself. That other platform, Digital Carbon Online, is all about. It's about giving you that information to be able to make those kind of informed business decisions. Do I need this page? Is it doing what I need? And then, yeah, I think I can give some other kind of ideas as well. I wrote a paper a couple of years ago called Exploring Digital Carbon Footprints, and you can Google it and you can download it for free. There were some themes in there that I came up with, and just a couple just to kind of make it nice and easy for everyone. When we're on a Zoom call like this, there's a carbon footprint of this. The carbon footprint is phenomenally higher if we're using video, if we're using HD video. So really what we should all be doing right now is turning off our video and cutting our carbon footprint of this significantly. But that would be a really boring webinar for everyone on the other end. Hopefully it hasn't been so far. But yeah, so anyway, so I mean, that's what you can do in these big team calls with your meetings. You don't all have to be on video all the time. So the slogan I have for that is be heard and not seen. And then the other one is we've got used to just leaving things on standby. And my nan used to really nag me when we were younger about she had the first TV with a remote control and a little red light. And if we didn't unplug it at the wall, she would nag us. And we just thought that was silly. But today we're in that world where we've got thousands of things just left on, hundreds in our own homes, just consuming little bits of power that all add up. So the slogan for that one is don't stand by, turn off. So I don't mean turn off now, hang around. We've got some Q&A. So I think we've reached the end of the formal kind of piece of what we wanted to achieve. And I can't believe we've hit exactly on time. So well done, all of you on there. I'm now going to open it up. We got some questions coming in on the Q&A. First of all, before we go to the questions, I will say that There's going to be some links that we share after this in the follow-up email. So I'll make sure they go into the email to come out to you, as well as the recording. So for all of those who made it for part or none of it, well, if you made it for none of it, you'll be seeing this on the recording. So hello. But now we'll head over to some questions. So let's see. So we got Chris Stevens. Interested to know the panel's thoughts on the right to repair. So who would like to have a go at that one first? Claire, you're smiling away. I'm going to hand that one over to you.
I'm happy to take it. Honestly, I find it very sad that we have to even introduce regulation for this. The way that technology started, or computers and mobile phones, was basically that. I mean, I don't know if you remember the Nokia 3310. If you dropped it, it smashed in many different directions. Or the fact that people would geek out on building their own computers and putting in different motherboards and all these things. It was what people used to do. And, it brings me to the topic of Apple's Mother Nature advert, pros and cons to it. But one of the things that I find really difficult to stomach is that I truly believe that Apple invented e-waste by disallowing people to actually fix their own devices. I think it is sad that we have to introduce such rules and regulations, but I think it's absolutely necessary, because we don't need a new phone every 2 years or 3 years. We don't need these things. We need new ones when the ones that we have can no longer be fixed. If the screen breaks, we can go fix it. That is not an issue. Many people buy new phones just because the screen is broken. I think it's very, very great. I think it's going in the absolute right direction where regulation is coming in. A right to repair is absolutely necessary, unfortunately. So yeah, I absolutely celebrate it.
Yeah, brilliant. I had to go and get my box of props because this is one of the most innovative Nokia phones I still have in my possession. You could take off the covers and it would relieve you with this little thing. And back in the day, I was working on GPS. So actually, that was the standard cover you'd get. But if you wanted to add GPS into it, then you just add in the other cover with GPS. So yeah, Fairphone is a great phone for that now. I know some local councils are using that as their devices of choice, because they allow you to upgrade and kind of swap out. Brilliant. Thoroughly support them. Does anybody else want to have a comment on that? Lucy, Matt? If not, then I'll be...
Claire summed it up really well, to be
Yeah,
honest.
okay, brilliant. So maybe we can move on to the next one about digital auditing. And Matt, I'm going to hand that one over to you, because I think you mentioned that earlier on.
In terms of, I'm just trying to kind of ascertain what the questions.
So I think let's answer it to the best of our ability based on the question that was given us. So I know you do sustainability audits and audits of websites. So maybe if you start from that point of view, how do we create those audits, and then how do we build on from that? And then maybe
completely. Yeah, again, so the fundamental kind of backbone of those audits is the measurement of pages. So getting that baseline digital carbon emission from a website is kind of the fundamental point. Then you expand on that by obviously looking at the elements that are contributing to that particular score. So there's going to be things like, the images, how much JavaScript's on the page, kind of the server, where is it hosted, is it on a green host, image, is there any kind of caching implemented, and it could even go as far as kind of looking at user experience and how long people take on the pages to find the things they need to find, and can you actually improve the navigation so people can find things quicker and spend less time effectively making carbon emissions on your website.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of the fundamentals that we kind of audit and then put in place a set of recommendations of how we would improve that for people's websites.
From a data center point of view, going to the other extreme, there are a number of providers that are doing sustainability audits on data centers as well. There was one that was under the company called Informa. If you know of Informa, they had a data center standard, and it was hundreds of points, and they ranged from huge kind of infrastructure things down to making sure you had your fan speed set at the right speed, because over a certain speed you're just putting more energy in, but you're not really moving much more airflow. So I think there's auditing across the spectrum. It just depends where your kind of sphere of influence and interest is as to what you would pick up on. So an easy one from here to Matt about, can we have the names and platforms of image compressing? You can either do that now, or you can send it to me and I'll put it into the follow-up email. Maybe you'd want to mention the names again.
Yeah, so there's a few we've used in the past. So compressor.io is one that I didn't mention before that is quite useful. There's also, if you're using WordPress, you can use the Smush plugin. As far as the kind of the web platforms, there's also Squoosh, so they've all got very similar names and it's quite confusing. And then, as I said, Cloudflare do if you use Cloudflare as a CDN, they do actually have image optimization as a layer as well. So you can get it all in one place if you go there.
Brilliant. So thank you for that. Just going to move on to one from Ben here. And Lucy, I'm going to hand this one over to you actually. Do you have any tips or tricks for persuading clients to go more sustainable when it comes sustainable options around web design, for example, avoiding rich media?
Yeah, I think it's always this sliding scale, isn't it? And it's compromise of, how far you want to go, because like Claire said earlier, like doing something is better than doing nothing. So I don't think it's a hard, fast rule of avoid video if you want a sustainable website. That's not feasible. Some people, they need videos on their websites, but I think it's kind of striking the balance again. Okay, if you want video, don't autoplay it. Like allow the user to interact and turn it on and off should they want it, because then you're avoiding just auto streaming all this data if somebody doesn't want it. So it's always that sliding scale, and it's the same with every kind of any thought process when it comes to doing the web design. I could say use one font and one font weight, because then we're loading less fonts, and that's less data being transferred. But again, that's not feasible. So we can find ways, like if you need a couple of different fonts, well, then we'll do things like we'll optimize that font. We'll get rid of, if it's for English people only, an English website, you don't perhaps need all those Arabic characters that are being loaded, or you might not need the pi symbol if there's no mathematical equations on your website. So it's like making optimizations where we can without compromising on what the client still needs on their website and how they want it to look. Because obviously black websites as well, black pixels use far less screen energy than a white pixel, for example. But that doesn't mean we should all design black websites. So it's not about this one rule for everyone when it comes to like even persuading clients to have a sustainable website. You can still strike that balance between, the brand, the accessibility, the sustainability, the performance, the SEO, like all of it is kind of finding what priorities and making those balances.
Yeah, and I think you're touching there on kind of do something, test and measure, or measure, do, test, measure, do, that kind of repeat. Somebody asked me on a interview earlier last week, is there a time when you tried to do something and you got it wrong? Like, yeah, all the time. But that's part of the journey. And I think we should all share those things that don't work as well as the things that do work, because that's how we learn faster. Kind of following a theme of something you said there, actually, we've got another question here. I'm going to pass this one to Claire. Everything so far seems to be about minimizing impact without changing lifestyle or outcome expectations. What does the panel think about? What do the panel think we can do about the latter? Do you have a thought on that?
I do. So personally, I take issue with putting the responsibility on the end consumer. I think, yes, everybody has a part to play and every little helps. I totally agree with that. But at the end of the day, it comes down to, if I, for example, create a website that is insanely heavy, if I make the changes there, then everybody who's consuming my website has made a change without intention. And I think you have much more impact if you are someone who is environmentally conscious and tries to live a more sustainable lifestyle, which I already try and do. I think the most powerful thing we can do is take that into work with us, because really at the end of the day, it's work where we can act collectively. Whether I switch the light on here and switch it off when I leave the room, or whether you do it, at the end of the day, yes, every little helps, and I never want to belittle that in any way, shape, or form. But the fact is if you were in an office, switch off the lights after a certain hour because you know no one is going to be there. It doesn't rely on the, for the sake of argument, 500 people who work in that office to think about it. It relies on one person to say, right, as of this hour, the lights are going to be switched off. If you want it back on, you can go switch it on yourself. So I think we have so much more power in changing consumer habits at work with the products that we design, with the products that we build. And you have so much more impact by putting it centralized in one place rather than spreading the responsibility and almost blaming, because let's be honest, the end user very much gets the blame for most things, when at the end of the day, it's a big corporates who are doing the marketing around all the products that we want you to consume. So if I'm psychologically influenced by your advert, is that my fault? I don't believe in pointing fingers. I think we have impact in every direction, but at work we have the biggest impact.
I think that's great, because one of the things that I fully believe in is my little company can only have an impact in its own sphere, but what we're doing is trying to influence others to make that impact as well. So our impact is multiplied through those that we can influence. And if you do that at work, great, that's a much better way of doing it. I really wanted to go into Innovation Zero yesterday in London, big climate tech event where BP and HSBC were headline sponsors. Clover Hogan had a really great thing to say about them, but we'll leave that for later on. Let's we're coming up to the top of the hour, so we should really wrap up. 2 more questions, and I've got one on AI, which I'm not going to cover. I'm not going to get to cover, I don't think, but let's be quick. Do you think there will be enough societal awareness that we'll all change our digital habits at a user level? Lucy, what do you think to that one?
I think it goes a bit back to that awareness, doesn't it, and that education, really. Thinking about our users of our websites, is there ever going to be that awareness in them that actually, like, I need renewable energy at home to charge my device? I think it's just all about that education, and like Claire tapped on, repair things, don't throw them away. Like, I don't know, how do we get to the point where at a user level people are more aware of that and more responsive to it? I don't know is the answer, to be honest.
Yeah. So anybody else want to have a thought on that? I've got 2 more questions to try and squeeze in 2 minutes. So let's go and just talk about AI then, because that one's come up a couple of times. I've been asked by basically the statements we made earlier on about the carbon footprint of the internet being bigger than the aviation industry, being the 4th largest in nations. That was done a while ago, that modeling. So how has AI changed that? I think it's one of those things that it's too early to tell yet, because it's not all the studies have been done, but there are some interesting signs. So there is general research that shows by 2028 there will be a 4 times improvement in computing power, yet the workloads will increase by 50 times, which goes with the ICCP's worry that even though technology is greening its energy sources probably the fastest of all industries, that will be outpaced by demand. Another thing here is that GPT-3 training, the training of the model generated in itself 502 metric tons of carbon just from training it, which is 112 cars being used for a year. And even when it's finished training, it still is generating 8.4 tons of carbon a day. And a ChatGPT request requires 100 times more energy than a Google search. So is it going to have an impact? Yes, a big impact. So again, being mindful of that and being mindful of what it is we're using it for and making sure we use the right tool for the job is, I think, the real key thing here. So trying to keep us right on track for the end of the day. 2 o'clock just hit. I just want to say thank you, a big thank you to Lucy, Matt, Claire for coming and talking and sharing their opinions and expertise. Thank you so much. And for everybody who took time out of their day to come and join us and to listen in, I really do appreciate your time. I hope you've learned everything. No, I hope you've learned something more than the great things that we said and shared with you today. There will be a recording made available with some other resources, but if you have any questions, then please do reach out to us. Just reply to the email you got. And if you want to test your website, then follow that link there, digitalcarbon.online/test, and you can have a go of it. So thank you ever so much, and a special thank you to the panelists. Thank you.